Hello, everyone. Um, yeah, welcome to those of you who have just arrived. We're just going to have a panel discussion between some wonderful artists that I'll introduce you to soon. So yeah, take your seats. Take your seats. Take your seats. Yeah, I think he's ready. Yeah. So please allow me to welcome onto the stage Katsuya Nonaka. He has come here from Japan to take part in this event, and he made the film that you just watched. And he's going to talk to you briefly, and then he's going to play Shakuhachi. And then we're all going to have a discussion together. So please put your hands together for Katsuya Nonaka.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. And my name is Katsuya Nonaka. Actually, I directed the film you just watched. And I'd like to play one song. It's called Koku. And that's the song played at in the credit of the film. So, okay, I'm going to talk a lot later, so I'm going to just play.
So yeah, I would like to now welcome our guests on stage. Please give a very warm welcome to Kiku Day, Clive Bell, and Shabaka Hutchings.
So, before we start talking, let me ask the audience, put your hand up if you ever saw a shakuhachi being played before what we just heard. Yeah. Okay, not
Pretty
bad.
good.
Pretty good.
It's better than Japan.
I think so. I think so. Yeah. Okay, so we got Francis on stage. You already know him, and this is so Katsuya Nonaka, director of the film, and Kiku Day. Kiku Day played an enormous part in setting up the European Shakuhachi Society, which you might be surprised to hear is extremely dynamic organization and has a lovely magazine. It's online, of course, but, and then Shabaka Hutchings. Yeah. Yeah. Secret guest. No longer secret, but...
Can I just give some context very quickly? So, I've invited Clive to moderate this conversation, and these particular musicians all together, I think I just kind of noticed something that would really benefit from getting them all together and just like having a conversation about music culture and what, I don't know, I guess the agency is what I see of how people approach culture. I think, particularly with an instrument like this, it's associated with antiquity in Japan, and it can be very intimidating to take it on. And all of these guys have spent quite a long time kind of promoting an idea of an instrument that you can just kind of play and take on, and as soon as you're interested in a culture, I think you're a part of it in some way. And yeah, there's this whole thing with Junashi and Jari, where the kind of really old shakuhachi that people don't really know about in Japan is just bamboo that you take out of the ground and put some holes in. That's kind of it, and that's really the point of it. And yeah, I feel like it's just something that needs to be shared more, because it's like this really old culture that you can just get involved in, and other cultures. But yeah, Clive has written about many of these artists before, so I thought he'd be a wonderful person to ask some questions. So take it away.
So let's start with Katsuya, because we've just been watching your film, which I think you made, is it about 8 years ago?
8 or 9 years ago, yeah.
And so since you made that, skateboarding now is an Olympic sport.
Yes.
How do you feel about that?
I know it's coming, so it's not really surprising, but actually it's taking the course that I actually expected. Especially in Japan, people see it as a sport. I mean, like, they only accept skateboarding as a sport. So they're building like lots of skate parks all over Japan, but street skating is harder and harder. It's really strict. So it's actually killing the culture, but the sporty, like I would say, like sportboarding is flourishing. Like
Sportboarding. Yeah.
And also like in Japan, maybe here the same, but like really young kids starting like maybe like 5 or something like that. I think they're starting skateboarding and then becomes really good at it. So sometimes I feel weird like being a skate park with those kids. Like they're way better than me too. So it's kind of weird feeling, and but still, I can still see like the teenage skateboarders in Japan embracing the street skateboarding, I think like they started like as a sport, even they start skateboarding as a sport. When you hit the certain age, like 15, something like that, they are more like curious about the culture and the history of skateboarding, and it's there still. So some kids choose to be a street skater, not a contest skater. And yeah, I think skateboarding-wise, we're still in the, I don't know, like we cannot, it's too early to say like if it's a change or not, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So when I saw the film, and you know, I didn't really know much about skateboarding, but you seemed to be saying that it was being threatened by, you know, threatened with takeover by
The
like,
big corporations.
corporations. And I thought, well, okay, I can see the point. But in the case of Shakuhachi, I don't see the big corporations coming for the Shakuhachi. And so I thought I understood that. But then I think just yesterday I heard that the #1 shamisen player in London is actually a Nike ambassador. I didn't even know what that meant.
Cool.
But I think it means he's got some very cool shoes. But anyway, I looked on his sort of website. It's quite a big deal. It's, so this is really happening. Japanese traditional music being kind of sponsored by Nike. So what does it mean?
I don't even know. It's just crazy, I think, yeah. But don't think Nike is gonna come after Shakuhachi, so it's
You
it
still
should be
don't think
okay.
they're coming?
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy, yeah.
No, okay.
Yeah, but like the big corporation taking over is happening in skateboarding. Just recently, this skater-owned shoe company called Lakai went out of business. And now like we have like Nike and Converse and Adidas and New Balance and Asics, like all sporting brands. And then like skater-owned brand is basically dying breed. So in the industry-wise, yeah, the taking over is happening, yeah.
Kiku, I turn to Kiku now. Did you, you had something to say about Nike?
Not so much about Nike, except for their nice shoes to run in. But the way I can relate to this problem in the shakuhachi is more than just Jinashi and Jari, as the film showed. It's actually the mainstreams being very influential and big in comparison with the group that Shimura Satoshi, who was in the film, talked about, the group that continues the Fuke way of playing, the Myoan. And they are kind of looked upon as bunch of eccentrics and bunch of amateurs. And there's something about that balance that reminds me a little bit. And of course, it's not big corporations coming in like that. However, in Japan, there's now a new society organization, NPO in reality, called the Japan Shakuhachi Professional Network, JSPN, which I actually somehow see as somebody who's making this division between the group that Shimura talked about that's kind of continuing. It's so complex, so let me just say kind of continuing the old style, and then the majority kind of modern players. So there's something there that reminds me of Nike taking over, kind of.
So you're saying there's a mainstream shakuhachi group, and they look down on the people who put the baskets on their heads and do the kind of old komuso styles. Yeah, okay. Yeah. I'm going to turn to Shabaka now. Probably a lot of you know Shabaka, an ex-saxophonist. And,
recovering saxophonist.
In the middle now of European tour, playing a lot of flutes, still a bit of clarinet.
Clarinet's kind of gone as recently.
Really? Yeah. Okay, so Shabaka, you got a relationship with Katsuya. You know him quite well. So tell me about that.
Well, Katsuya, kindly offered to show me the process of harvesting and making a shakuhachi, leaving it to cure for a year. We did it, the curing, the kind of process, and I'm going to go back and see it again. And just for me, it's a slow process in learning the flutes and seeing actually what the thing is. And I'm in no rush to really do it. So for me, like just being exposed to the process and then seeing it again and being able to reflect on it will just deepen my understanding of what I'm doing, because I'm not really learning with a teacher. So all I can do is like watch people do the thing and soak some of it up. So for instance, I'm not even sure if you know it, but you were the first person I heard play the shakuhachi in person. When Mariko carried us in the car and you played. And I thought about that there's a dynamic range of the shakuhachi that's distorted when you hear it on records. There's just a kind of dynamic range that you don't assume hearing the audio coming at you in like a waveform from a stereo, whereas if you hear it live, there's a whole dimension of like the actual resonance, what the resonance does in relation to your own body that you're aware of. And that's, for me, a part of the shakuhachi. And actually, from hearing it in person, I've been able to hear particular things in players differently that I wouldn't have been aware of. And yeah, so that's been the relationship, having that dynamic.
So you're going to make your own flutes?
Well, I've made 3 of them, and then there's another 4 pieces that were harvested, and then made them as in, watch Katsuya do it, and then just kind of following the measurements. And, having done it, I've actually started to really look at the shakuhachis that I own and think about what makes the sound, desirable for me in the particularities of how the mouthpiece is like shaved in each, particular one. So it's been great.
Okay, I want to go back to Kiku. Kiku is sort of based in Copenhagen, but moves around a lot. And I want to ask Kiku to tell us who is playing shakuhachi these days. It's not just people playing it in Japan now, but it's got a kind of international profile. Sometimes in surprising ways. So could you take us around the world?
I will try, and I'll try to do it as short as possible. I took some notes on my mobile. That's why I'm looking into it. So in Japan, obviously, that's where it comes from. And the first time that the shakuhachi goes out is with the Japanese immigration that happens at the late 19th century. And that immigration is to North America and South America. So you can still see the groups of Japanese immigrants that are doing some Japanese culture together and playing, and it could also be shakuhachi. If you look at the Rempokan, it's a newspaper, Japanese language newspaper from LA. You can see in the beginning of the 20th century how they are doing advertisement for example, shakuhachi lessons. So that's the first part. But the part that really is influential until today is the first generation Americans that went to Japan and learned shakuhachi, and also the Japanese kind of famous masters that went to American university to teach at the ethnomusicology programs and things like that. That kind of exchange that happened, I would say, probably from the 50s, but especially from the 60s as well. So that's kind of the first generation. And also Zen Buddhism was quite, there was kind of, Zen Buddhism went to the States, especially North America, and had a big influence there. And that I also think laid the ground for the dissemination of shakuhachi in the US. And then there's an influential shakuhachi player, Riley Lee, who's from the US, who's also first generation, who learned in Japan. He went to Australia. So that kind of, so it really depends on the people who play and the activities that they do. And then in 1994, the great shakuhachi player, Yokoyama Katsuya, he made the World Shakuhachi Festival in Bisei in Japan, and soon after it went to the United States, where there was the second World Shakuhachi Festival. That was in 1998, which was a big success. There was a time where there was still a lot of money around, and it was a huge festival. And these kind of things influences also, you know, when Yokoyama Katsuya exactly played November Steps with New York Philharmonics and toured around the world with that, that certainly really influenced people and spread the shakuhachi. It certainly made people hear the shakuhachi outside of like the normal shakuhachi box somehow.
Yeah, I mean, about November Steps, that's the reason I wanted to play, because I heard a recording of November Steps, and I was a flute player, and I just thought that is the best flute I've ever heard, and I want to make that noise.
I can understand that.
And that was Yokoyama. So just that piece kind of propelled me into it.
And it's a very typical story. There's many people who came to the shakuhachi through recordings of November Steps. So Europe came much later, I would say in the 2000s. And it's kind of funny when you see how, when you think you're the pioneer, but you're never really the pioneer, because you seem to be part of a group that starts every wave. And so in the 2000s, there were people in Europe that started kind of gathering and then doing the European Shakuhachi Society. Now, today, there's so many shakuhachi players also in Europe. One thing I have to say that, you know, in the beginning when I started teaching, people had always, I mean, I would really say close to 100%, came to the shakuhachi via Zen Buddhism or the interest of Japan. That could also happen, but mostly Zen Buddhism. There was a point of time when that changed to anime and that kind of thing. And it also really changed both the age of the people that came and wanted to learn shakuhachi, but also the type of people. So we became a much more kind of diverse group, you know. One thing in the 2000s, you know, later than Europe, that has come now is Asia, apart from Japan, obviously. China is going so strong. I mean, in a way, there's so many players and they are so young. And I don't know exactly why, because European players are not that young, even with the anime generation and things. And also other Asian countries like Taiwan and Vietnam and Thailand to some degrees also are coming along. So that is the next. And then the last place I want to mention is that it's actually incredible how this kind of interest spreads out, and how I suppose the digital communication also helps in spreading culture and how we get interested in each other's culture. Because when I went to Ghana last year, I immediately got 8 students, you know. So they were like, oh, teach us Shakuhachi kind of thing. So very interesting. So I would say that was a very, very, very short version of how the Shakuhachi went around the world.
Yeah, no, thank you. But, so just one follow-up to that. Would you say it's less popular in Japan now than... Well, I went there in the 1970s, and it seems to have declined since then.
So you're the first generation too. Yes, it has declined. It's actually very interesting. You know, I do research on shakuhachi, so when I read old newspapers, like from the 1930s, 1940s, then there are little articles about shakuhachi everywhere, and there's shakuhachi ads everywhere. It's like, and you see teachings at university, you know, cycles, you know, where they go after lectures, they go and then do some hobbies together. There are like 100 of shakuhachi players together, and that's not the case anyway.
Was that in the 1930s?
Yeah. So I was researching how the shakuhachi was used during the World War II. And in the beginning, I was like, wow, so much shakuhachi during the war, until I realized it's just because so many people played it, you know. So 1970s had already declined after the peak in the 60s, probably, but there probably was still some. But it probably was really like a retired man's hobby kind of thing. And when I went there, it was the same, and it kept on declining. But what has changed a little bit now is that the shakuhachi and also other Japanese traditional instruments have entered pop culture, pop music. So there are like wagaki band, you know, bands playing rock music or pop, you know. Using these instruments, and in some ways that had influenced the world. You know, when I went to Japan, if you went to a music store, there were only Western instruments, but now there might be a shamisen hanging somewhere among the guitars. But if you measure, for example, the membership of the big groups, you know, how many are members, it's still declining, and it's been declining ever since about the 70s, probably.
So someone showed me a newspaper advert from the 1930s encouraging shakuhachi players to dress up. And so the traditional way to dress up is to put the basket on the head, and then there's a costume, and you can pretend to be a komuso monk. And they used to beg in the street. And you still sometimes see that. That's the people that Kiku was saying the mainstream kind of looks down on them as a bit crazy. But anyway, this advert was saying, you know, come on, buy the basket and buy the costume. Let's go begging. It's always good to go out and go begging as a sort of musical style. So, yeah, but that's a long time. That's nearly 100 years ago.
Clive, can I just prompt Katsuya to talk about komuso a little bit? Because last night Katsuya did a performance in kind of a bit of a showcase at another venue down the road. And yeah, the way that you talk about komuso being kind of rebels, kind of punk. So I guess it's kind of what I have used as inspiration for the name of this event. Yeah, I would love to hear that if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah, it's okay. So, Komuso monks are considered as a monks, but they're not really. I mean, like, before they became Komuso, there are people called Boro and Komo. And those people are like street hustlers, like guys like playing the flute and then begging and then get like money and food and get by. And Boro was like teaching Buddhism to the people, even though they are not monks. And they're basically hustling in the street. And then they merged together, and then they became Komoso. And then after the Edo period started, the Komoso changed the name to the Komuso because it sounds more cool. Because like Komo is like kind of like a bomb, and then Komu is like more like sounds like Buddhism. Like Komu is like emptiness, so sounds really cool, right? So so Jen changed the name, and then it's registered as the like one of the sector of the Buddhism in Japan. And since they are not really monks, there are like many different kind of people in the Komuso scene. And yeah, so the basically they're gangsters, and that's when the Shakuhachi changed. I mean, like they started using the roots of the bamboo at the bottom. Before that, like they didn't, like they just cut it and then like in half and then like just halfway, you know. And they started using the roots at the bottom, and there's no like evidence like why.
So the legend goes.
Yeah, this legend, but I believe, I prefer this. They are using the shakuhachi as a weapon as well, because it's really rock hard, the bottom, so it's really dangerous. And even in the kabuki play, it's like Japanese traditional play, and there's this one story called Skeroku, and it's about the story about the gangsters like doing the revenge to the guy who killed his brother. And then this main character, Skeroku, also has a shakuhachi. And he's not a komuso, he's not a monk, he's just a gangster, but he has a shakuhachi, and then he carries it like this. So, looks like a weapon, actually. And but it's cool, because like, it can be an instrument too, so you can play, and then guards will be like, oh, you're so cool, right? And then some guy came to you, and then just use the other weapon. So it's really cool, I think. And another gangster stuff Komuso was doing was, in Japan, like Komuso were traveling all over Japan. But like those main street has a gate. And you have to actually have the certificate to get through, like a passport. And so like normal people cannot really like go out, like, you know, like travel around. But Komuso could do it. Like Komuso got free pass over those gates. And the reason why is like they had a certificate granted by the government. And they were showing the certificate, and it's actually not just like the pass. It has like lots of like benefit for the Komusos. Like Komusos can play in front of people's house, and then should be paid, stuff like that. And also like if you find someone skeptical, like you can arrest, even though you are not a cop. Yeah, so it's those like crazy like benefits for the Komusos there in the certificate. And then 300 years later, like almost the end of the Edo period, they found out it's all made up by Komuso. it's not granted by the government. But like they just made it up and then like just show it to the officers and here's the certificate and then okay, you pass and like that's really gangster because like I don't know, it's just making up the passport. And also like back then, if they find out, they will kill you at the spot. So much risk too. But they didn't give a fuck. Just go for it. And then it worked. And then once it worked, it's gonna work forever, basically. Yeah. So that's really cool. And then that episode really like hypes me up too. Because like Kiku said, like the population of shakuhachi players dying, like decline. And it's like grandpa's thing now. So it's not cool anymore. And that doesn't really attract people like me. So, yeah.
There's a scene at the end of your film where he pulls a dagger out.
yeah.
What is that? I never seen that.
Yeah, that was crazy, huh? Yeah, I was really like, oh, really? Like, it's so cool. Yeah. I really liked it. Yeah. I'm not sure if it's real or not.
Yeah, that is, by the way, the head monk of a temple in Tokyo, who also, he has created the Komuso Research Group. So he's a very serious man, but...
He's really laughing at that point.
Yeah. He was so happy.
I think he was happy to surprise Katsuya.
So, Shabaka, I think you started playing shakuhachi, was it about 5 years ago?
About that, I got one in just before 2019.
Yeah.
And then in the pandemic was able to actually start practicing it
Yes.
in a way that made me kind of, understand.
And I heard from colleagues that you practiced a lot.
Yeah. I think, I'm an instrumentalist, so I've been playing Western instruments for a long time, so I just know what you need to do to learn an instrument. But the shakuhachi is great in that the dynamic level of it means that you can play it in places that are less conspicuous than the
Tunnels are really good.
A saxophone. And also it feels good to play. I think that's the thing that drew me to the instrument. Contrary to some other examples, I didn't hear a person play and want to sound like them. I kind of came across an instrument and then started to really enjoy what it was to play the instrument. And from there, kind of moved from that.
Yeah, so it's the instrument itself.
It's an instrument itself, yeah.
Yeah. What I want to ask you is about the Japanese tradition and your relationship to that. Because when a lot of people learn shakuhachi, they really, there's a big tradition of especially solo pieces, like the one we heard Katsuya played. This is a kind of big thing that a lot of people want to play that. Obviously, there are other pieces as well, and there's chamber music with koto and all this. But anyway, there's a tradition, and each shakuhachi player has to decide what's your attitude to the tradition. So could you talk about that?
Yeah, I guess I've thought about these concepts in relation to jazz before coming to the shakuhachi. So it meant that I've done a lot of processing about where I stand in relation to someone else's music. And in terms of my position in relation to America, it had always been that I think that if I try to understand the instrument itself, audibly, like on a sonic level, know the music that I'm, within, but then just try to practice every day and have a line in my practice. That means that I'm just working on the things that I think personally I need to develop myself within. At some point, it intersects. So at some point within the jazz thing, because I understood what the music sounded like, and I was actually practicing in a way that connected my physical actions to what I was hearing inside, it means that I could play jazz. I understood, basic harmony, and it's like I'm still learning like what the groundwork of fundamental harmony is. And actually, the more I learn, the more I start to kind of expand out the complexity of what I'm doing in a jazz context. In relation to the shakuhachi in particular, if you think about, you're talking about Japanese culture, and for me, it's something that I've just not come to grips with fully conceptually yet, because it's like there's understanding a culture by reading about it and by seeing the depictions of it. And then there's understanding a culture by living within it. And I can't live in Japan at the moment. Also, I think that there's a difference between the reflections of a culture, like the things that highlight what a culture is, and the culture itself. So for me, and I can only say in relation to black culture, the culture that I guess I'm coming from, or black diasporic culture, the aspects of the culture that, like for instance, if you were to say what aspects of African culture are significant, you might say dance, and you might say art. Those things highlight an aspect of the culture, but for me, it's not the culture. The culture is an attitude or a worldview held by a group of people that's reflected by certain things that you might ascribe as the culture, but for me, it's not the culture itself. The culture is the attitude. So the only way of me understanding the Japanese attitude is to just spend time with Japanese people as much as possible, which isn't very much because I'm a touring musician, but it's just about, just trying to understand what the thing is. So, in learning the shakuhachi, I've been trying to just focus on principles as opposed to specifics at this stage. So, for instance, one of the things that I think I, understand of Japanese culture is an aspect of uprightness but relaxation as this kind of pendulum, like circular thing. And I've just understood this from my dealings with people and, the situations I've been in relation to Japan. And it might change the more that I go, through life. But at the moment, this is what I see as a principle that circumvents the whole thing. So in practicing the shakuhachi, I might just try to figure out how do I stay upright, but have some sense of flow with the thing. And that's how I'm treating the aspect of culture, like what the cultural aspects represent and what they mean to me in my particular investigations. And it's ongoing,
Is something in the body itself?
Yeah. Like, for instance, someone told me recently about blowing in a way where you're pressurizing your inside, and the only outlet for the pressure is the kind of mouth, as opposed to blowing being the act of blowing air through the body. And it might result in the same thing, but it's how you conceptualize it. So, for instance, in my personal practice, I'm trying to play long notes and actually create a pressurized environment that's only released in the kind of pinpoint of the top of the mouth, and that's the practice. So for me, it's like there's the tradition, there's the pieces, and then there's can you play a note starting from 0, going to 0.000001, and slowly build it up. And it's it takes so much to practice to just get that and to be able to bring it up and then bring it down. I don't have time to play the pieces because I'm still literally learning on trying to get a note to actually sound and to play start at a particular dynamic. And sometimes pieces can get in the way of actually just learning how to play the instrument. And I've just got so much to do. I'm I'm just going to try to just keep practicing every day, play those long tones, and then it'll come together at some point.
Yeah, no, very good. Let's throw this open. So if anyone has a question from the audience.
I have a question while everyone else is thinking. I wanted to ask Shabaka if you feel like there's a desire for you to learn any of the traditional style, and whether if you're if you're full of learning kind of more technical things, or I don't know. I was wondering if you feel like there's something that you're pushing back and being not yet, or not at all, or just out of curiosity, really, as someone that plays it so much.
Yeah, things happen in their own time. I think when it's time for me to learn particular aspects of music, it'll be right. And for me, as long as I'm practicing, you know, the instrument regularly, then that's the important thing. I try to not get bogged down into what things mean unless I'm really thinking about what they mean. So, for instance, it might mean a particular thing on the outside of not learning the pieces. But, you know, for me, it's just like, yeah, I don't know, I just do my thing. I wake up every day and just do my thing. And it's like, at some point, they'll come into the fray. How I think it will come into the fray is the way that I've treated learning the big classical music pieces I've learned. And it's like I've come from a background...
It's what it feels like.
Yeah, I've come from a background of learning classical music. So it's like I've learned a classical music. And there's a lot of things that I've had to like battle with against that, going through like an institutional learning of like European classical music. So it's like I'm not in any kind of big rush to like learn someone else's classical music.
Yeah.
But I do, you know, appreciate that there's like things that, there's technical specificities, and there's just aspects of, just the enjoyment of playing the pieces and understanding how it fits into like what the instrument can do. But like I said, I'm trying to literally just play a note and get it from 0 to 0.000.
You can't just spend forever doing that.
And, you know, I feel like when that's happened, then it might be time to start learning those pieces.
Yeah.
There's no rush. It's fine.
Thanks.
Hey. Can you talk a little bit about how Shakuhachi combines other instruments, or does it not?
Combines what, sorry?
Combines with other musical instruments, whether that's a thing for the future or not.
So the question was, can we talk about how Shakuhachi combines with other instruments, and whether that's the thing for the future? Combines, yeah.
I can say that. So the shakuhachi, in the form that we know now, was first used as a solo instrument as such. And among this group of the so-called monks, there was actually a kind of a rule that they shouldn't play the outside pieces, which included ensemble music. However, we know that there's plenty of evidence, like drawings and things like that, of Komuso playing ensemble music. The instruments that the shakuhachi first played with, and actually the first reason for that the shakuhachi began to be changed in construction was this ensemble music, which was together with koto, so 13-string zither, and shamisen, which is a 3-string long neck lute. So that was a particular Edo period ensemble that was very loved at the time and has a huge repertoire. So the shakuhachi entered that. So I would say that is the only traditional 2 instruments the shakuhachi plays with, if we can call something that's kind of from the end of the 19th century is traditional. But after the shakuhachi became liberated, that it wasn't just the Komuso monk that had a monopoly of playing the instrument. It actually went wild. There were lots of composition written, lots of combinations. So today, the shakuhachi is used with lots of other instruments, and especially musicians educated at the conservatories in Japan. They are really good players in playing, you know, so that they can play in ensemble. So no limitation there. Mm-hmm.
I suppose I've got a thought about playing with other instruments. I mean, shakuhachi is a quiet instrument designed for small rooms. This room is much too big for shakuhachi playing, and it's a bit like the viol. Baroque English music was played in small rooms. Those instruments don't project to the back of the hall. You sit close to them so you can see the player wincing and as they play, and that's that intimacy is part of the music. Then later on, someone invents the orchestra, and the halls get really big, and so all flutes had to get louder. If you're sitting in an orchestra playing a Western flute in a Mahler symphony, you've got to have a good flute that plays loud. And the debate in the film about Giari and Jinashi, are you going to have lacquer inside your flute or not, which is a very interesting debate. And part of it is about how loud are you going to play. If you want to play loud, and people are now writing shakuhachi concertos with orchestra. Dai Fujikura just wrote one.
I think Dai is here today, possibly. Yeah,
okay.
there he is.
Welcome, Dai Fujikura. Brian Eno over there. Great. Sorry, that was a joke. Sorry. Yeah. So that's a tough thing. You're going to play loud enough to be balanced with an orchestra. So anyway, I've got some personal pain about trying to play.
I think as flute players, we all do.
We have,
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I talk a little bit?
Flute players' grumpiness is based on always being quiet.
Yeah, talking about the being quiet, I think that's a whole point of playing shakuhachi, because that's the beauty of it too. Because like it's really quiet, so you can hear the surroundings too, and it's a part of the music too. And also like we think this way, like shakuhachi sound is also the part of the surroundings too. So there's no like me eventually, and so that thing is really makes sense to me. Like the monks like Komuso were doing this, playing this instrument for like enlightenment, because like the Buddhist goal is like just disappear like your ego. So I think it's really interesting, and also the feeling that I get, or probably you too, is like it's very quiet. So it's like it's not just me, but it's all of us, and then be in that moment together. So like yeah, I think that so that we create the atmosphere together too, and so it's really uplifting. I think like in a way, it's completely opposite of like rock or punk, like yeah, and then people are like yeah, and then like being like feel like a one, but we can do that like without being like that. It's really quiet, but it's kind of same feeling too, like it. So
Attention, really, yeah.
I play really loud music too. I'm in a band called Seppuku Pistols. It's obviously inspired by Sex Pistols. And we use like Japanese traditional instrument and then playing like really hardcore music. And it's super loud. And I love that.
They don't have ear protection as well. I tried to tell him.
Super loud. It's crazy. But so I love being in the band too. Like, but also I love playing shakuhachi and in that zone too. And
Yeah, sorry, Shabaka.
And what's interesting is, I guess you're talking about cultural exchange. Like what happens when you put the culture, the sonic culture, literally the dynamic that's associated with a group of people, next to another aesthetic completely. And is it 50-50 in terms of like the actual balance of power, in terms of who goes towards who? And the problem is, in a lot of cases, it's not. So people don't go towards the shakuhachi, because it should be not, can the shakuhachi play as loud as you, as the other instrument? Is can the other instrument play as quietly as the shakuhachi? And in most cases, it just takes a bigger level of technique to be able to come down, so most musicians just can't do it. When I recorded my album, the last one, we did it with no headphones and no separation. So it forced everyone, and because I'm the band leader, it just means I just told everyone, look, you can't play louder than I'm playing. It's my session, and I'm playing these quiet flutes, and you just got to deal with it, and don't get too excited. Basically, I just said, you can't get excited and that excitement show itself in the dynamic level raising because I'm not going to raise and you're just going to drown out. We won't be able to use the take. And it just meant that people just actually played sensitively and it wasn't so much an issue, which might be the personalities that I was, you playing with. And there's definitely a particular type of musical personality that will not bend to the other. It's either like, I'll dominate that sound that is too weak to rise towards my sound, or I'm going home.
Yeah.
Can I
Well, look,
can I add something? I'm jumping a little bit. So we're talking about shakuhachi making as well. Both Katsuya Nonaka and I are trained by the same teacher, and he belongs to somewhere in between. He's certainly a minority, but maybe not as much a minority as the Bjorn players. For him, it was a very important aspect of our training that we went and digged up bamboo in the mountains and then preserved them. And then later on, he also did workshops and taught us how to make our own shakuhachi, which is kind of in the line of what the Komuso did. They made their own instruments. That is, of course, also a very minority thing, but something that we have with us that I find really, really valuable.
And also, usually, if you want to buy a shakuhachi at the shop, it's really expensive.
It's so expensive.
Yeah,
it's like
crazy.
really, yeah. I guess that's also the Jari Jinashi comparison.
Yeah. So when you play jinashi, like the old traditional way, you can just make it by yourself. So basically anyone can do that. So it's really doors are open, and that anyone can do that, and like a DIY. That actually, it's really punk to me. So that's why that's one of the reasons I was getting into shakuhachi actually. Yeah, and also with jinashi, the traditional way, you just adjust yourself to the bamboo. So there's no bad bamboo, bad shakuhachi. There'll be hard to play shakuhachi, but it's just hard to play. So it's kind of, sometimes it's even better if it's hard to play, because it's the challenge. So then you get the joy, conquering the bamboo, and then finally I got this, and then the sound comes out of it. It's really calm too. It's not it's like wow, peace. Thank you.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. I really like it.
Yeah, really quickly. But that's fine. Go for it. Bring it.
I'll have to say one thing. It is that we actually don't know if the Komuso monks meditated. And here I come as an academic, and I know that there is a lot of notions about it, but we have not a single, maybe a single mention of it in writing. And Japan is a very literate kind of culture. They wrote a lot. So we don't know. What I can say is that nevertheless, whether the Komuso meditated or not, it's a kind of a notion that we somehow inherited into being an important aspect. So I think that is much more important. However, because we don't have anything we got from them, how to do it, there is no notion of for example, if you want to go into Zen Buddhism, there's a certain way of doing the meditation, there's certain training, you might do koan on these kind of things. However, in Shakuhachi, there's not. So you kind of have to find your own way. And I have actually really tried to figure out how does the doing of playing Shakuhachi connect with the non-doing in meditation, which is a very hard thing.
I not knowing the culture at the beginning, I felt like before I realized this, that I was worried that I had to become a Buddhist before playing shakuhachi. I was like, for it to be culturally appropriate, just because I had no idea. It was really nice to realize that I didn't. But also, I love the connection as well. Yeah.
I was asking, as there's more cultural synthesis in traditional Japanese music and in music in general, how are we able to preserve shakuhachi and traditional philosophies and mentalities when it comes to shakuhachi and dealing with the shakuhachi while there's a lot of innovation going on as well? How do we balance that and how do we preserve it? Because, yeah, like you said, it's declining. The people who are playing are declining, and yeah.
Yeah, would someone like to take this and then we'll finish? Thanks.
So to preserve the culture, I have a school. I have a shakuhachi school, and I have students.
Katsuya has many students, sorry, and teachers.
Yeah, students, and I just teach them how to play, but also what I believe about shakuhachi. I say it could be a meditation because I feel it could be a meditation because it's about breathing. I don't really feel like I'm blowing or playing. I'm just breathing. And then focus on it, and it kind of super similar to the artist Buddhism too. And sometimes when I'm doing it, I feel like I'm watching me playing. The body is just moving like an autopilot. And then that kind of feeling is I don't know, detachment? I don't know, it's that feels like I'm doing something right. I don't know. Yeah, but it feels good. And so I tell them eventually you're gonna get that. Because right now, the beginners are struggling with the technique and stuff, so they don't reach that point. But eventually, we're gonna go there. And also, the culture thing is the most important thing that I believe about shakuhachi is there's no bad bamboos, and that can apply to the people too. Because the change of the shakuhachi, becoming GRE, standardized, really represent the society as well, I think. And I didn't like it, and but when I found the original, the older style shakuhachi, it was completely opposite. It's more open, and then the approach to the nature is humans has to adjust to the nature, and then you can have the music. It's not changing the nature for people's convenience, and so those type of things. I also not teaching, but just telling them the story, and yeah, hopefully they carry I think I attract different type of people rather than just old grandpas. Cause the youngest student that I have is 9 years old, and he's coming with his mom, and his mom is also really punk too, and another one. I have so many I don't know, weirdo students. That one is
Shakuhachi is obviously doing all right in Japan. It's good to hear.
I just add one little thing to the.
Yeah, Shabaka. We should
Yeah. One final thought, please, and then we'll finish. Thanks.
I guess my final thought is just like what it looks like when a culture dies. Like if it's that the orthodox rendition of the culture is being in some ways threatened by modernization. And I'm just talking in general, not specifically with Japan. What does it look like when it's actually been overrun and when it is no more? And I guess it looks like no archive, because the existence of an archive means that even if there's one player of the traditional shakuhachi way, as long as there's a way of someone looking back and seeing how you do it and trying and being able to understand what the thing is, then it means that the culture is continued. But when the archive goes and that last player is gone, then that's like the issue. I was with a 90-year-old bow player in Swaziland, getting some kind of stories and stuff from him, and he was really desperate in that the young people actually weren't learning the Swazi bow. And they were all going from the countryside to the cities for work, and to the mines for work. And this tradition of how you play the bow and how you make the bow was being gone. And it was only him and a couple of other like 80-year-olds that understood it, how to do it. And there was no one documenting it. So some academics were doing it, by the period when I was kind of going and seeing him. But that's the case where it's in a precarious position culturally, whereas as far as I can see with the shakuhachi, there's enough archive that there's no real fear of the old way, the traditional classical way of it disappearing, unless the archive were to disappear.
Yeah, thank you.
So just one,
This is really the last.
Yeah, one sentence. A living culture is always changing. So, no problem.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you.